Go.Compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. At Go.Compare, we are pleased to be partnering with the Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign, recognising the individuals who are going the extra mile at grassroots rugby clubs across Great Britain. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to nominate a grassroots hero who could win £5,000 for their club, as well as hints and tips from our insurance experts at Go.Compare.
Hello listeners, new and old. We have an incredibly busy episode for you this week. We're going to recap the opening games of the autumn at Twickenham, Allianz Stadium, and the other game at Murrayfield, Scottish Gas Murrayfield. Got to get those sponsors right. And we're also going to look ahead to a packed slate of games this weekend too. I'm Ben Coles. I'm joined as ever by one Charlie Morgan.
Colsey.
Hi Charlie. And one Charles Richardson.
Hello everybody.
Hello Charles. Before the big dissection of England-New Zealand, Charles, can you give me a sense of what the mood was like just sort of after the end of the game and after the final whistle?
Well, in the press box it was very frantic because England have chucked away an 8-point lead again, not an 8-point lead, but another lead against New Zealand, third test in a row against the All Blacks, fourth test generally, where they were leading at some point in the second half before, in the end, succumbing. It was deflation, I think. There was very much a sense of it was another one that had got away, and I think it was a genuine surprise, even with what we'd seen so far this year. I do think that most of the people inside Twickenham would have backed England at the 65th minute when New Zealand kicked those 3 points, especially when there was that turning point with the Itoje penalty to go on and win. And I think it was just a bit of shock and awe. There was obviously late drama with the drop goal, but I think it was a real cathartic, sort of deflating moment just straight after the final whistle. Yeah,
it's hard that. Were fans sort of like, oh shucks kind of thing, or?
I think it was more sort of, there was more passion. I don't think it was a sort of what a shame one that, I think it was genuine. We should have won that, and there was a bit of sort of
edge.
There was edge. Angst is maybe a little bit strong, but there was certainly a bit more edge to it than just what a shame.
I was confused. There's a medic behind the post. I didn't realise what team he was with, and he was celebrating wildly. I thought,
could
wow.
It
It could have been either. But I was, looking at his kit, which was probably the wrong way to try and work it out.
Charlie, really exciting slate of games this weekend. We've got Ireland, New Zealand, England, Australia, Scotland, South Africa. Which is the favourite for you? Which one are you most excited about?
Give me Scotland, South Africa, pipping Ireland, New Zealand, just because Scotland, South Africa, well, both of those, there's sort of hangover from the World Cup in both of those. Ireland, New Zealand obviously being that quarter-final that was now remembered by a fantastic sledge fantastic, Rico Ioane, just saying get back 10 to Johnny Sexton, immortalised in the latter's autobiography. So there's going to be a bit of needle there. That's a shame, though, that just drops down because it's a bit of a shame it's a 6-day turnaround for the All Blacks, I think. And they've lost Bodie Barrett and Cody Taylor, I think, already. Scotland, South Africa, they played in what was a really fascinating group game in Marseille at the World Cup. Scotland trying to outflank that box blitz, didn't quite manage it. It was actually a defensive masterclass from the box, but that was really, really interesting. The scoreline blew out at the end. You remember Manny Leboc's no-look kick pass to Kurt Lorenza, just a mind-blowing bit of skill. And Scotland warmed up quite nicely. South Africa have had a fantastic rugby championship to get going, so it's going to be awesome, that one.
Listeners,
you're at it.
And I'll be there. Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be back at Murrayfield, looking forward to that. Listeners, you have until we get to the Scotland-South Africa section to remember when Scotland's last win against South Africa was, so we'll let you just stew over that until we get to that point. But there's so much to talk about from Twickenham. Let's get right into it in the next section. Okay, I mean, let's start with the finish, Charlie, and it's another tight loss. You've sort of dissected on the website on Sunday morning, kind of the chaotic last 15 minutes. And so if I now try and ask you to summarise a whole article, just specifically the final sort of stages, I guess, where did England let this slip again?
I think there's a big, Charles mentioned it right at the top, the big turning point, sort of, for want of a better phrase, sort of emotionally, I guess, with how the stadium felt, was them coming back for what was an England penalty after Itoje's jackal following Earl's no arms tackle on Pacilio Tossi. Beauden Barrett comes offside because he's sort of frustrated, and his body language is almost like, right, I've given up the ghost here. Obviously that gets reversed, kicks 3 points, and it's back to 22-17. But before that, I think the scrum is just, England are in a funk with that at the minute, and it's almost as though it doesn't matter how well they go at the beginning of the game, and they eked out 2 penalties, one on either side out of New Zealand in that area in the first half. But just as soon as that starts going wrong, it snowballs, and if you take that kind of colours everything else, because seeing people say that England sort of part of the bus, stopped playing, it's a real struggle to play when that's not going right. Their line out was messy as well. I think the stats sort of say that they won 90% of their ball, but the ball they were winning wasn't great. New Zealand gave up the front and let Cunningham South sort of take that at the front, and that's just not enough. England's maul got going once on the verge of half time, then they go to touch from that penalty that the maul wins, and it's another scrappy one that precedes the drop goal attempt. But to go back to the scrum at the end of the game, the very last one, so England get this remarkable lifeline, having won back the restart after Talai's second try, and that scrum in the shadow of the posts goes right back to the 22 because Tossie does a number on Jamie George, and Finn Baxter absolutely splits him. George having come back on for Theo Dan, and Don Brandt can't pick it up because he's got to get his head down and sort of lend his weight to it, and Alex Randall is then scampering away, throwing it behind forward, and all of a sudden England are back to the 22. They might have got a penalty for a bit of a high shot on forward, but I don't think England can complain for the help what they got from what they got from the officials over the game. England can't complain with.
Charles, even though that last scrum, as Charlie highlights, was a real mess because of the pressure that came on, England still had time, didn't they, to sort of go through some phases and to reset and to create a cleaner pocket for forward, and yet they didn't do that. And so how damning is that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they had their chance, I think, a phase before. It seemed like they were better set for the drop goal a phase before. Eventually, when Ford got the ball, it was messy. He was under a lot of pressure, and I don't think he should have been dropping the goal there. But then if he doesn't drop the goal, he's isolated behind all of his forwards, and he's probably getting turned over anyway. So it was a bit of a sort of shot to nothing almost. But I mean, yeah, just to touch on what Charlie said on the scrimmaging, I mean, the scrum was a mess in the second half, and it does need sorting out. The English scrum was a mess. Credit to Will Stewart, he did really well against Tamati Williams, who's a monstrous man in the first half. But when Baxter and Cole came on with Theo Dan, they really did let it slip there. I mean, George Ford has sort of been the lightning rod to a lot of criticism. Has been the lightning rod to a lot of English criticism from this defeat. It's a tough one, really. Was he the right selection, having not played since September? I mean, he came on with one really good up and under out wide that Sua'ali'i reclaimed, but then it was a little bit conservative. They didn't stop playing per se because they didn't really play that much in the sort of the first 60 minutes. They weren't really sort of that, except for a Marcus Smith early cross kick to Sua'ali'i in their own 22. But it just seemed a little bit conservative. There was one clearance kick to touch in England's 22 from George Ford in about the 70th minute, where it just seemed like he was almost going through the motions a little bit. It was just like, right, let's just get the ball out and reset. And they did seem like they were sort of going into their shells a little bit. And being honest, like we'll never know, but I never thought that drop goal was going to go over. Just from an instinct, from an emotional thing, I didn't think that drop goal was ever going over. It just felt as though New Zealand knew that they would win. I think the moment to win that match was the penalty, which hit the post, which obviously Ford, if he's played 2 or 3 games, might have got. Maybe Finn Smith might have been better coming off. We'll never know. I don't think Marcus Smith was quite as strong and this sort of messiah as everybody sort of said. He had a good game, and I probably wouldn't have taken him off for Ford, but I might have switched over the fly halves with an 8-point lead, just fresh sort of pair of eyes, fresh legs, just to see the game home. I just don't necessarily think that Ford was the right man on that day. I think generally he is. He's excellent, and I'd probably have him starting for England, but he hadn't played for so long. And you saw him being a little bit rusty with his kicking and his organisation. There were a couple of nice touches ball in hand, but then he's missed the tackle on Talai'i. I know others did as well, but he's also missed the tackle on Talai'i, and ultimately it's very difficult to sort of make a case for him when there's such high profile incidents like that.
I think the missed tackle on Talai'i is the most glaring thing from that Ford cameo. I know the two misses obviously at the end sort of decide it, but that Marcus Smith had just made a tackle in a really similar area of the field, a one-on-one with Satiti. Lawrence and Ben Curry come back and they win the jackal turnover, and then that's the point that Smith's taken off. Smith has really improved his defence. To a couple of points there. One off the back of that first diagonal high ball that Faye Bosa gets from Ford. That to me, so Sam Cane is straight in over the ball. That was almost like a right, let's take this into my own hands moment from Sam Cane. I thought that was really impressive. And then the other thing about, I think New Zealand really deserve credit for starving in England in two really specific areas. If England's attack is going to go well, as we've seen, they're going to get some pay off their kick return. New Zealand kicked contestably for all but one kick, I think. They gave England one opportunity on kick return, which led to the Caleb Clark deliberate knock-on, and so they starved them there. And then they also made a mess of their line-out, which ruined that platform. So there's two key areas that England are effective at when things are going well that New Zealand took away, which was really clever from them.
It was, if you look at some of the numbers, which I did afterwards up at Murrayfield, just to get a gauge of what happened, New Zealand made more handling errors, conceded more turnovers, and lost the penalty count by some distance. So all the kind of layers were in place for England to get the win. And there were countless times, weren't there, where New Zealand sort of had breaks opportunities in the first half, and then there'd be a knock-on, or England would get back and scramble D and just deny them. So actually, the opportunity was just so there for England to actually get this one over the line, because the All Blacks just weren't at their best. I think that's why this one, out of the recent losses, will probably frustrate, because the All Blacks were not good for large patches of this, and England blew it.
Absolutely, and England's discipline as well, we should say, was remarkable. It
Yes.
was absolutely superb. They probably won't have as well disciplined a test again, maybe. Like, that's very rare. I mean, I think, what was it, on the 50th minute they'd conceded one penalty?
Do you remember how much we used to criticise like the Eddie Jones England teams for being in double-figure penalties by like 50 minutes or half time?
I mean, there was once upon a time, there was this sort of coaching theory when, if you're still in single fingers, i.e. not conceded 10 or more penalties by half time, you've had a good half, and they've conceded one by 50 minutes. And I mean, yeah, it's the New Zealand bench had a massive impact. The thing that is the most agonising aspect of all of this is that I don't think a 2-point loss to the All Blacks is necessarily the most shameful thing in the world. I mean, none of the squad or Steve Borthwick would have taken that last week. They obviously want to win, but I don't think it's sort of panic stations to lose by 2 points to New Zealand. This is still a very good All Blacks team, and I know people say that they're on the wane. I'm not necessarily buying that at the minute. I think, if anything, they're on the up. But the most agonising thing is that it was an 8-point lead. It was 2 scores in 15 minutes. It's similar to South Africa in the World Cup semi-final, but I just don't think the expectations were as high then. 2 scores in 15 minutes is why it feels far more agonising than perhaps the raw data of the scoreline suggests.
Yeah, we've not spoken about Wallace Satiti yet, which makes me sad, because he was absolutely fantastic, wasn't he? What was your favourite bit from the young flanker? Who, it is like having two Ardie Severes on the field. Ardie Severe said that he sees a lot of himself in him, and if you've got two kind of dynamic back rows like that, that's a hell of a package.
No, absolutely. I wonder if they might be tempted to switch the two and have Severe at 6 and Satiti at 8, just because I think that Satiti might be just a little bit more sort of quicker off the base. I think he might just have slightly more dynamism over that sort of 5-10 metres. I mean, I know Surveyor's leg drive in contact is freakish, but I just wonder if Satiti's got the sort of gas just to get round the flanker. I'm not sure. But my favourite moment was probably the offload for the Telea try. That was awesome, right in front of us, right in front of the press box. We had a really good view of it. But there were loads. There were so many like lovely offloads where, I mean, I was doing player ratings and I think I gave him 9. I think, I'd love to see what a 10 looked like.
Wait, how easy?
Being critical of myself.
How easily does Charles Richardson give out 9s in the player ratings?
Not easily.
I want to gauge how high a level.
Not easily, as I'm alluding to there. What would he have had to have done to get a 10?
Have you given a 10? You must remember giving a 10 out before.
I think I gave a 10 to the South African replacements in the World Cup semi-final as a cohort.
Fair. Yeah,
nice.
Can't really argue with that. Charlie, what else did you like about the All Blacks in terms of stand-up players, stand-up moves?
Damien McKenzie's conversion was ballsy, and you remember how striking how far back he took it. It was nearly at the 10-metre line. So that's a hell of a strike. Liked Cam Roygaard at the end. He's the guy that's right in Ford's eye line, and also he also ran a lot of those that phase play prior to Leia's try. They looked like they were going to be sort of buffed. It looked like they, by running that going for a tap rather than the scrum, that was kind of odd decision. And then Dombrandt absolutely smashes, can't remember who, Tuipulotu. And I mean, going back to Tuipulotu, I think he changed the game from the bench.
Yeah.
Both sides of the ball. Actually, before Marcus Smith's interception, he's made a huge carry up the middle of the pitch and looks like he's put England on the back foot kind of terminally. And then at the end, he empties George Furbank as well. But also quite importantly, I think he's almost responsible for that power surge at the scrum as well, because he gets in behind the tight head, taking over from Tupu Vai there, and then New Zealand was sort of on the up from there, scrummaging wise.
But I know Cody Taylor and Beauden Barrett are out of the Ireland game, but it's not a blessing in disguise. They're obviously sensational players, both of them. But Amua off the bench was fantastic as well.
79 minutes.
Played 79 minutes off the bench and was quality, like real good, put in some massive shots. I know his arrows probably aren't quite as good as Taylor's, but he's a beast. And I think you won't see Beauden Barrett necessarily have a worse game at fly half than what he did at Saturday. You know, he was still very solid because it's Beauden Barrett, but he was didn't have his best game, and I wonder whether actually Mackenzie at 10 might have been better anyway and might be better against Ireland. I mean, we'll never know because Bowden's not available for selection, but I just wonder whether it might be a bit of a blessing in disguise for Scott Robertson.
Just to bring it back to England, I kept thinking after the final whistle about that quote that Jamie George said to us on Thursday, Charlie, when we were at England Access, where I think you asked him about why he believed that they wouldn't get the end wrong again, and he just talked about in the New Zealand game about how with the All Blacks they sort of let the All Blacks dictate the last 20 minutes of those tests in the summer, but then he said we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Did he not quite fulfil that promise?
It was horribly familiar, wasn't it, for England? I think that the trouble is that it's a lot of different. The trouble, or maybe it's easier to put it right this way, but there are a lot of areas of the game that they're struggling with just enough. So the line-out's messy, so they're not necessarily getting pay for the territory. They're getting a lot of 22 entries without capitalising on those and scoring points. So they're closer than maybe the energy that they've expended deserve them to be. So they're relying on their defence, and the defence, when it's squeaky clean, it does exert pressure, but then one discipline lapse and then they're in their own 22, and then it's sort of a kind of they're in a bit of a vicious cycle, and breaking that is gonna take a while, because Steve Borthwick totally kind of disregarded the question about the psychology of this and whether it's kind of lingering and whether it's now seeping in. But I don't know about that.
How can it not be?
How can it not be?
Is what I sort of thought after the. How can it not be starting to weigh on their minds when they're trying to close out these games about the recent near misses? Because I want to bring this around to Australia, because there were. I'm glad you referenced Will Stewart. I actually thought that was kind of a career-defining performance from him in the scrum, because it's one of the best kind of games that he's had for England, and will have shifted a lot of public perception about him as well. I think because we've been asking questions about what's the future for England at tight head when Dan Cole goes, and it might actually be there. But Charlie Culling himself offers so much in terms of physicality, doesn't he? He had that massive tackle and sort of revved up the crowd as well. So there were individual moments of real quality. But Charles, you sent like a nice little dispatch as you were leaving Twickenham to us, just called it sign of trying to summarise to me what you felt about the game, because I was at Scotland. And you said, wow, this really heaps a lot of pressure on the Australia game to get a win. Do you still have that sense now, a couple of days later?
I think so. I think they have to beat Australia. I mean, they have to win every game, but I think they have to beat Australia on Saturday. Otherwise, you're staring down the barrel of maybe only one win in the autumn. But I think it's, in a sense, a bit of a blessing that they've got Australia on Saturday and not South Africa, because actually after these, if we discount Japan in the summer, after France, New Zealand winning in the second half, or having a lead in the second half and watching that slip away in all four, they probably do need, and no disrespect to Australia, a slightly lesser opposition on Saturday than the world champions to maybe just get that confidence back and, just get them back, have a bit of a reset on the straight and narrow, and just be like, look, we are a very good rugby team, but we just need to win some matches now. And if they go and win on Saturday, I think, which they should, that's a perfect setup for South Africa going from that New Zealand game when. You're right. How I mean, it might not be a deep psychological factor, but it's just fact that these leads have slipped away. Like it's just fact. It's inescapable. So they need something to sort of tune them up. And Australia on Saturday could be that, but also they are a good side, and Joe Schmidt can always pull a rabbit out the hat, and they will be. They will not roll over Australia.
It screams trap game to me.
It absolutely does.
I'm a little bit nervy about it already.
They've got Will Skelton, so the scrum's going to...
Exactly. We saw in the World Cup when they had Tupou at tight head, if they pick him if he's fit, with Skelton behind. Again, if they pick him, because obviously he didn't play during the Rugby Championship. If they have those two scrimmaging on the right-hand side, then I don't think there's any scrum in the world that can stop that. I think that would demolish the South African scrum, because it's that's, you're looking about 300 kgs, and they're good as well. They're technical, strong, big, weighty men, and I mean, what a week for Joe Marler to retire.
Tupou's fantastic when he's fit and available. We will get to Joe Marler a bit later in our Q&A section. In terms of personnel, Charlie, what would you like to see England do differently? I mean, I'll ask. We can all weigh in on this, but what would you like to see England maybe tweak? Is scrum half still wide open? Were you as sold on Ben Spencer as others?
Some people haven't been. I think he had a couple of tough exits, didn't he? And there was that kind of, again, inexplicable sort of mix-up at the tail of a maul with Theo Dam, which is exactly the same as what happened in Dunedin in the first test, and sort of seemed like a major reason why Spencer didn't get on at all in the second test in Eden Park. So that happened again. However, I'd keep him. I just wonder whether they need a bit more ballast on the bench, whether that is, and that's probably going to be at 19. So whether they go Alex Coles or Charlie Ewels there, they clearly weren't convinced by the Nché being part of that 6-2 at all, because he came on in the 78th minute for Ollie Lawrence with Ben Earl going to centre, which was it's sort of one of the things that you're kind of rubbing your eyes, really. So yeah, I would look at that, I think, as a major thing, and then I would probably go back to 5-3 as well. That'd be my tweaks.
Any quick personnel?
I would agree with that. 5-3. I think I'd have Slightham on the bench with George Ford, and I think I'd start Jack Van Portfleet at 9. We sung his praises last Monday, and he was the only scrum half left out of the 23. I think I'd drop Spencer back down to the bench to come on, and if they do want to shore things up, it just felt a little bit muddled, the thinking with Randall coming on with Ford and about closing out a game. I'm not necessarily sure that's Harry Randall's forte. I think I'd start Jack Van Portfleet, who's probably a blend of the two, and have Spencer coming on in a 5-3 bench. I'd also go for Coles, because the England line-out struggled a little bit in the second half.
It does make that game more interesting, actually, the fact that England are coming off another tight loss, and certainly one that we're going to look forward to. You'll both be there. Will you both be there?
Yeah, we'll both be there.
You'll both be there. You'll both be taking it in. But there is a game before that on Friday night in Dublin, which is particularly spicy as well. So let's have a quick break and then get into that one.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. As a proud sponsor of the WRU, we believe in the importance of grassroots rugby. That begins with the people who are going the extra mile for their local clubs, on and off the pitch. That's why we're partnering with the Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign. From volunteers to groundsmen, referees to coaches, we want to celebrate the people who are really making a difference and reward them with £5,000 for their club to improve the grassroots game. If you know someone who deserves to be rewarded, we want to hear from you. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to find out more.
Okay, Ireland's first game of the autumn on Friday night. I think the consensus in the room is that the scheduling is quite unfair on New Zealand, only having a 6-day turnaround to go to Dublin and patch up. It doesn't seem very just.
No, because they will have flown on Sunday straight after the early after the game, and then they've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They've got 4 days to sort of prepare to meet one of the top 2 teams in the world on Friday night at home, who are fresh and who didn't play last weekend. So, now, and obviously we've spoken about the 2 injuries that they've got. As I said, I think that might help them. We'll never know, but I think yes, the scheduling has been unkind to them, and they've got just a tough autumn anyway. England, Ireland, then they go to Paris to face France, and then they finish with Italy in Turin, which, okay, New Zealand will go in as favourites, but as we know, Italy are massively improved. New Zealand's the last game of the autumn, and that is a potential banana skin with some tired bodies.
Two quick things on the All Blacks. Has Damien McKenzie stopped smiling when there's conversion? Because I was watching him in the captain's run at their hotel on Friday, and he wasn't smiling then, and then I thought, oh, maybe he just does it.
Saving it up.
In matches. Yeah. He saves the smiles.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I saw him doing it on TV. I'll be sad if that is.
He'll be back
gone.
Starting at 10. They've got a few guys who weren't involved in 23 at all. TJ Paranara being one, Parafeta. De Groot, yes. So they've got guys to come back in, but I still think that 6-day turnaround is so tricky.
And Rico Ioane's mullet is looking unreal.
Ready.
Unreal. Thick.
Yeah.
Buoyant.
Yeah.
Will he step outside in Dublin this week, or will he just think maybe I should just stay inside and avoid contact with any Irish people after what happened with Johnny Sexton?
Doesn't seem like he's that fussed by confrontation, so maybe he'd be up for it.
In terms of Ireland, a bit of a debate about, well, not a debate. I guess the question is at fly half, who do you think we'll see? Will we get Jack Crowley again? Will we get Frawley? Who, Charles, do you reckon is the likeliest person there?
I think Crowley is the likeliest because he's the incumbent. He's got the jersey, as it were. Is he the right choice going forward for the World Cup? I think that's the debate. I wonder whether Kieran Frawley might have a higher ceiling than Jack Crowley. Is Jack Crowley almost there? Has he got loads more development in him? Not sure. But I mean, I think they've got a great duo. They've got a great double up there, and obviously we saw it in the South Africa test in the summer. Frawley coming on and kicking that winning drop goal at the end off the bench. Up
there with the most handy players in the world to have for a 6-2 bench as well. Frawley, isn't he? He's super versatile, super accomplished in a lot of positions.
Yeah, Kellen Doris will be captain, but it sounds like Peter Imani is trending in the right direction. He had 40 minutes against the All Blacks 15 for Munster on Saturday. They've been to Portugal for a nice warm weather training camp over the weekend, which always sounds very pleasant. It does seem settled. Hugo Keenan's going to be back as well, and obviously they've missed him for patches.
Sheehan obviously missing. Kelleher. Kelleher's also been nursing an injury. Is that right?
Kelleher's going to be. I think Kelleher's going to be good to go. But yes, he has been coming back. I think when I was watching the first half of the England New Zealand game, I was thinking, from Andrew Porter and Tug Furlong, I'm getting quite excited about how the scrum was going, and then obviously that narrative flipped on its head when the replacements came on. But I do think that Ireland are in a very strong position.Ey've got this insane record, haven't they, against Southern Hemisphere teams dating back years now in terms of consecutive wins in a row. I can't quite see New Zealand upsetting that, Charlie.
I can't. No, I think they're just on a really nice roll with I know when we sort of did we write them off for the next World Cup, Ireland, just as far as age profiles. I know there are a lot of sort of articles saying look how old they'll be at the next World Cup. However, that means now that they're bang, those guys are just, there's so much know-how about them. They are clearly looked after quite well over in Ireland with the provinces too, and they'll be that week to have off is maybe quite nice. Although there's always that argument of do you want to have a test to sort of harden yourselves, but I think they will. I think they'll hit the ground running. They're very, very tend to be very strong in November, don't they?
I can't see an upset either at home Friday night in Dublin. It'll be rocking, no doubt. And I mean, just their squad depth is crazy. Like, I mean, if Omani isn't, if they deem him not fit, I mean, you can pick one of four, like Conan, but Ty Byrne, I suppose, could get moved to 6. Ryan Baird. James Ryan's done a job there, but I don't think he will. I think they'll keep him in Ian Henderson has played 6. They've got loads.
It was a New Zealand team with Aaron Smith, Richie Mo'unga, Sam Whitelock, those absolute guns that were phenomenal. Had to be phenomenal to beat Ireland in that World Cup quarter-final, which was an unreal game. Obviously, it's a different New Zealand team. Not to say that they won't end up reaching somewhere near that side, but it's certainly a different New Zealand, and I think Ireland have got enough.
Charles, you might be the same. I often find myself just thinking back to the end of that Ireland-New Zealand game in Paris and how kind of we forgot to breathe for a couple of minutes at the end during that final attack. It definitely sits up there as one of the most extraordinary tests I've witnessed in person, and I don't think Friday will match that for intensity, because how can it? But do you feel similar about that?
My blood pressure that weekend registered new records in the history of humankind. Because it was the Saturday was Ireland New Zealand, and I can remember at the end of that hearing my heartbeat in my ear towards the end of that, and like feeling it and being like, oh my word, when Ireland were, they had that last stand at the end, and it was the same against France-South Africa, with France a day later with them trying to come back. And obviously, there was an element of underdog and this to it, and France as hosts and Ireland as sort of favourites, having beaten South Africa in the pool stages. But I mean, if it's like that again on Friday, we're going to be entertained.
I mean, Rico can handle himself, obviously, but good luck to him in the first ruck, I guess.
Yeah, there's going to be feeling there.
It's going to be spicy.
That's what we want. If there's one complaint about these three kind of back-to-back England-New Zealand games, is there wasn't enough sort of edge. Bit of there wasn't. They all get on really well, and there's not that touchiness, which is just a real shame.
Stop being friends.
Yeah.
And just one final detail on Ireland. Obviously, Andrew Goodman is now Ireland's back coach. He worked with Razor for a long time at the Crusaders. I'm sure Andy Farrell has been leaning hard on him this week for just a bit of any sort of intel on players, on strategies, on tactics that they can potentially use. So that's on Friday. Got England on Saturday, and then Scotland, South Africa is a Sunday tea time treat for everybody watching on TV, which I think is a lovely way to finish the weekend. Charlie, you were with the Boks in Jersey. All of the stuff on social media suggests they've been having a lovely time.
And on the flight over, do you remember?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Do you want to tell your flight over story for the fourth time?
Okay.
Okay.
You guys.
I mean, please do.
I won't. I'll spare it.
Listeners, please go back to last week's episode to get all the details for that. But yeah, they've had this nice time in Jersey. Scotland. I was there for Scotland-Fiji. A good hit out for Scotland. Admittedly, not much of a game, because as the Fiji coach Mick Byrne said afterwards, I think we need to reevaluate these tests outside the regulation window, because they didn't have any of their England or France-based players. He said that some of the Drua lads coming off the bench had literally only played like 3 or 4 games of professional rugby. Like it was good. It was good for the respective try tallies of Johan van der Merwe and Darcy Graham, who are in this wonderful boat race now to be top try scorer for Scotland. And Charles, you talking about deadlines and copy. I had a similar thing where I was profusely praising Darcy Graham for levelling Duhan's record of the most tries for Scotland, and Duhan just runs one in. So
that was off the Sua'ali'i Tuipulotu pullback to
it was
Adam
exhibition.
Hastings flick. Yeah,
Hastings with a flick out the back, which was
so everyone runs
fantastic.
Everyone runs that shape, but they just sort of made it a little bit difficult for themselves and just kind of still made it work. And
it paid off gloriously.
Can I highlight one really funny thing from that game? So if you've seen the video of Darcy Graham's when he takes Adam Hastings cross kick from the penalty and then grubbers down the line, there's a great camera angle of him doing that down the touchline, but you also get to see Christoph Ridley, who is obviously keeping a really sharp eye on where Darcy Graham's feet are, and to do so he is running with a hunchback and then cannot help himself, I think, but just go, oh, that's quite good, while he's running like that, and then sort of then opens his stride from there as his back straightens on it. It's just, it's you have to be there, you have to watch it, it's good.
Can we have that noise again?
Oh,
nice.
It's really good.
I was convinced he knocked that on. Like live, watching it in the many replays, I was
going to say live and then on the replays.
I was not sold that he had somehow avoided.
He is a player, though, isn't he?
Look, he's fantastic. There's such a nice balance between Duhan being like this freight train who just barrels through people, and then what Graham does, sort of hitting angles and lines off his wing and off 9 and 10. He's a stellar player. Only thing he did wrong was when he got absolutely done by a dummy from the Fiji captain for their try off a line-out, where Graham just completely bit, and then he was stood there afterwards, like hands on hips, just going, I've fallen for that hook, line and sinker. Charlie, going back to your time with the Springboks, which we haven't heard much about, you we're going to hear a bit of your chat from Eben Etzebeth, and just talking about England and their inability to close out tight tests. It's one thing South Africa do very well. So let's hear a bit of that now.
It's a difficult one to answer. I think, it's unheard of winning three playoff games with 1 point in a row. Obviously, need a good goal kicker for that. I think Andre was exceptional, and Mane also played his part. You need guys with belief. I think when we were down 15-6 against England with a scrum in our 22, a lot of the fans, a lot of probably the management and players thought, except the guys who was on the field, thought, listen, this might be a little too far. Then it needs belief, it needs guys who've probably been in dark places before in their lives, who's had struggles in their life too, because it's not going to be easy. And then to go on and win the final is also another great achievement from the guys. So yeah, you need some guts, you need some guys who've been probably through difficult times in their life to just come out on top when it really gets tough, and to, well, like I said at the England game, to pull it out of the fire.
Do you speak about those dark times a lot when you are wanting to drag something else out of yourselves as a team?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it before test matches, that when we play certain opposition, like these guys will go to a dark place with you. They're willing to be there with you for a long time, and it's probably who's going to stay there for the longest. So we do mention it from time to time. But yeah, that's a part of it, and obviously with that comes preparation, guys knowing their detail, and yeah, guys keep on believing that Springbok jerseys, playing for a nation back home that really supports us and wants us to do well.
Is there anything technical that you judge yourselves on, maybe as a 1%er? I remember Martin Johnson saying that nobody knows how hard a second row pushes in a scrum apart from the prop in front of them. Is there anything that maybe other people wouldn't see that you would come off the pitch and go, I'm happy with how I did that?
Yeah, I think we as a forward pack, we say we always try and make the other guy look good. For example, if I do look good in a contesting line-out, or Luat or Archos does well in winning a line-out, or the props do well in the scrum, you always need guys around you who never get the credit, but you know they were there. And the same in a line-out, I mean, without a hooker throwing, two guys lifting me or one of the other locks, we won't be able to win the ball. So you need those guys around us. You need that unselfish actions. So there's a lot happening in a game where unselfish actions can't be measured. But yeah, I truly believe in this team. That's a big thing for us to do those sort of things that you not necessarily get credit for, but the guy who you gave it your all, he knows in the back of his head that his mate gave it his all.
You probably don't care about outside perceptions of who's rated in the team, but are there players that you feel widely aren't? Who would be someone that always comes off the field and has given their all to a teammate and has made teammates look good, that maybe doesn't get that credit generally? Yeah,
I think Sia's a good example. I think he does a lot of work that is not necessarily seen by the public, but when is that running back from a kick and cleaning a breakdown, and then on the other edge maybe a Cheslin would score a try, but no one knows that Sia secured that ball. So I think he's a guy who prides himself on that. He doesn't really care if people tell him how good he was. He just wants to have the respect of his teammates, and there's a lot of guys. I think this whole team has guys like that in it. But yeah, if I have to quickly mention someone, I think Sia's yeah.
And Charlie, you asked Nché a similar theme about how South Africa are able to just get over the line. So let's hear from the Springbok prop as well.
I think it's the desperation to work for each other. So even we always have, I mean, Coach Soka is, like we call it, off the ball work. I just came from a scrum, and I see the ball is on the other side. Am I just going to jog there, or am I going to sprint into line? Even though the ball carry is not coming to me, it's far from me, am I still going to make sure that I'm there and I'm set and I'm ready? Or I'm just going to say, no, that's far from me. It's not my problem. So I think the urgency to work for each other, and it doesn't matter how far the ball is from you, to just make sure I get on side, I get in position before the other team does. And I think that's probably one thing that I say, maybe because of that, the ball tends to just bounce on our side a little bit.
Is it something you're aware of in the moment? Like, will you come up from a scrum and go, the ball's over there, that this could be pivotal?
Yeah, I think, definitely, because normally we the props always are the ones that are filling up the space in the midfield. So you always try not to be lost.
Charlie, from those two chats, and just from time around the Springboks, did you get an idea of what the extra percentage is which makes them different to other teams in those tight games, and what gets them over the line?
Not quite from them sitting and answering interview questions, but no.
Did they have little name cards in front of them as well?
Yeah, they did. Okay, it was like a speed dating
nice.
sort of setup. But no, I think from their togetherness is obviously very apparent. Their experience is very apparent, and I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way with those tight games, knowing, as Etzebeth was talking about, how they know that they can get their way out of any situation. And I think a lot of that does come down to the depth they've got in the pack, across the pack, and how that makes them such a good set-piece team. Those scrum penalties are obviously very, very handy, and that one in particular was brought up a couple of times by both Erasmus and Etzebeth. That one from Kurt Liorenza's knock-on of Owen Farrell's grubber that was a huge turning point. But no, I was asking them, I was trying to sort of be clever and sort of ask all of them a question about sort of is there something technical or tactical? And I know they talk about sort of those battle stats around the breakdown, and I was wondering whether they're going to talk about, I'd think about how low my shoulder is at those when I'm one-on-one with somebody over the ball or something like that. But a lot of the answers, as you can hear, are about belief. Etzebeth talking about how they tap into the upbringings that they've had and how they've got to where they are from different points and tough places. So it seems like a cocktail of things, but it was seriously interesting to hear about it.
Yeah, we saw it at Twickenham on Saturday. I think that South Africa are the gold standard of teams identifying that the scrum is quite a relatively minor facet of the sport when you put it all together over 80 minutes, but actually it's a really easy way to generate momentum, and it can snowball very, very quickly. And I think every team would know that, but they are the ones who are executing that the best. And actually, we saw it from New Zealand. We've already touched on this, but we saw it from New Zealand at Twickenham on Saturday about how that was laid the foundations for them clawing their way back into the game and really getting a stranglehold. And I think South Africa have realised that that's a non-negotiable for them. That's not optional. That is obligatory. We're going to have a massive last scrimmaging 15 minutes because it's very easy for you to get into other teams' head by getting on top there.
Yeah, I mean, blindingly obvious point of the week, but if you have two world-class front rows available to you and you can dominate that area, then your chances of winning the tight games, as we saw on Saturday, are going to be vastly increased compared to other people. To go back to that trivia question from the start, the last Scotland win over South Africa was, guesses, quickly? You've got 3
2006.
Seconds. No.
2010.
Yes.
Oh!
But how? How did they get there?
It's got to be a dodgy few. It's got to be rain. A very rainy day.
Safe guess.
Rainy day, and they'll have limped over the line.
It was 7 Dan Parks penalties.
There we go.
Actually,
there you go. I'm pleased.
To get that win back in 2010 against, I think, Peter de Villiers coached South Africa side. Do we give Scotland a bit of a chance here? There's so many things that I think we all like about Scotland in terms of personnel alone. Amazing centre partnership with Tuipulotu and Hugh Jones. 2 great wingers in Duane and Darcy Graham. Blair Kinghorn will be back at fullback from Toulouse duty. Finn Russell's back at 10, which obviously helps. And at scrum half, they could go Ben White, or they might go stick with Ali Price. I really like Rory Darge in the back row. He just tackles absolutely relentlessly. It's just going to be, I guess, if the scrum can hold up. And when we spoke about the Scotland scrum earlier, Charles, you referenced
the pool, which we've already referenced. The pool game between South Africa and Scotland at last year's World Cup, where on the stroke of half-time, when the scores were very tight, I can't remember the exact score, but it was very tight, Pierre Schumann and Xander Fagerson did a number on the South African props at scrum time, and not only won a penalty, they demolished the South African scrum. And at that point, I think I was sitting there going, this is a game here. Scotland could do this in the second half. That felt like a real tone setter, but then actually South Africa came out firing in the second half, and also at scrum time, and that was the apogee of the Scottish scrum that day. But I think I do on the basis that Scotland have already played a test and will be more familiar with each other, and South Africa, okay, they've had the Rugby Championship, but they've not played in a while. They might be a little bit rusty. If the Scottish pack can hold out, there's always a chance.
Charlie, anything to add on that? I think we're expecting I think South Africa will win, but hopefully we get a bit of a thriller.
It's kind of an early test for how the success that Glasgow Warriors have had in the URC and the success that Blair Kinghorn has had personally with Toulouse. Claire Binghorn. How much that seeps in and maybe gives them that extra tiny little bit of belief that when I asked Kinghorn about this at the Champions Cup launch, just how much of a benefit can your exploits be for Scotland as a whole? And he said, well, I know now from being around people like DuPont that you don't go into yourself in those big moments in big games. It's almost doubly important to back yourself and back what you've been doing in training. So that would seem to perhaps be sort of a last piece of the jigsaw for Scotland. And if they can, what a win it would be to sow belief for for the years to come.
Don't mention Antoine Dupont in South Africa, mate. That doesn't go down.
Best player ever?
It doesn't go down very well.
Yep.
Right, plenty of questions from you this week. Thank you so much for sending them in. Let's dive into them now. There are loads. Okay, questions. Tons of them. Starting with Loro. Please, can you speculate on why now Joe Marler retiring? Please, can we speculate? Sure. Saw that again, showed up in the scrum better than expected. So is there a need for Marler? Marler's an interesting one, isn't he? Because he was... In terms of age profile, in terms of next wave of props, England are better on the loose head side, arguably, right now in this moment, than they're on the tight head side. But also the reasons for him retiring, Charles, that they seem more personal, don't they?
Yeah, and I suppose it would be unfair to speculate and speculate on that particular avenue, but he has said in Girona, he just sort of realised that he wasn't enjoying it very much anymore, and he has spoken about that in the past and just said, look, this is me. He's probably at that age profile where he feels like, well, he's spoken about the semi-final, he spoke about last year and him and Dan Cole coming off and sitting on the bench and saying we did all right there, and
being cathartic.
Yeah, and spoke about the semi-final and the final in 2019, and I think he's felt like he's done and he's leaving it at the right time. Just to touch on your question, Loro, I don't think the hacker comments had anything to do with it. But of a serious blaze of glory, though, to go out in, I think, and he's really sort of burnt the house down.
Getting a news line out of Scott Barrett is a hell of a way to go out.
Exactly, yeah.
That, honestly, when I was there for that, it blew there for Scott Barrett's press conference. It blew my mind when he said that.
What did he say?
When he said that Marlowe loaded the gun.
I was
just there thinking, wow, did not expect Scott Barrett to bite.
I know, and but just I think we should pay a little bit of a tribute to him. I do think he'll go down as one of England's greatest loose heads, maybe slightly underappreciated or underrated, perhaps, just because of his sort of tough, sort of rebellious attitude off the field, and the fact that he had that sort of to him a little bit and sort of polarised an English rugby public at times with some of his opinions. But I think he's still now the best loose head scrummager in England, even at this age, and I think there's an argument that he has been throughout his whole career. When he first burst onto the scene, he was an incredibly dynamic ball carrier. That sort of went on the back seat a little bit, but he became a phenomenal defensive loose head as well. Lions tourist, and I think this England team will miss him.
Miss him enormously. I think the game will miss him enormously. We need more characters like him. He adds so much personality into it. Yeah, okay, last week it got a bit out of hand, but I think he's such a point of difference between the kind of like the generic kind of press releases and press conferences and stuff like that. I think he's actually a huge loss, and we'll miss his character.
Agree. He said in a few... Well, I've seen a couple of statements and a couple of interviews he's done, but in one of them he sort of said, I feel very proud of him, proud of myself, and I'm really glad he feels like that because he absolutely deserves to.
He really does. He really does. Moving on, next question from Adam. Can you put the finger on why the English scrum has fallen behind top nations? It used to be the bedrock of success, now it's a weakness. We sort of touched on this, I think, last week, didn't we, that the next wave of props are coming through, but a bit like the old Grolsch advert, it's not ready yet. There just needs a bit more time to kind of get them coming through, and that's why there's a bit of a disparity between how the England scrum is starting and finishing.
I think it is. It's deeper. It's more fundamental. It's cultural. It's a bit more systemic. I think that we don't respect the scrum and its place in the game as much as, say, France, South Africa, even New Zealand, in all honesty. I think it starts with everybody. It's tiny little things that then add up to become something big. You watch some Premiership coverage, and if the scrum's taking a long time, you see the pundits and the commentators losing patience with it, talking negatively about it. That isn't helping. I think we are getting there with that, and I think they are realising that what they're doing there is just not helpful in any way. Lots of people like the scrum. There is nothing better, I maintain there is nothing better or more unique about rugby than a completely dominant scrum, 8 men or women pushing back 8 men or women and sort of watching them splinter and crumble. Like it's raw, it's powerful, the scrum is synonymous with rugby union, with the sport, and I think for a time we took our eye off the ball in England with that. I think that is being addressed. We have there is obviously a gap between the likes of Dan Cole, Marler, and then there's quite a schism before you get to Finn Baxter, Opoku Forjaw, Vasog Bon, Billy Seller, those kind of guys. You've got Will Stewart in there, you've got Joe Hayes in there, but they're outliers. But I think we have a really good crop coming through, and long may it continue.
How about Will Collier going on tour to Argentina in 2017 and not getting capped again?
Yeah.
Or playing a Barbarians game and not going so well, and then never after some fantastic form for Harlequins. That is Charles has nailed it really there. I did a bit of work around the proactive sort of type 5 camps that the RFU have done, and they were sort of saying, that it's an area of the game that has been admitting that it's an area of the game that had been neglected at the preference of sort of having ball players and pace and dynamism in loose in those positions.
I mean, we can even bring it into present day really, and we, for all the good work that's been done. I know there's more to the game and there's more to propping and scrummaging, but in that England 23 last Saturday, the best scrummaging tight head was the only one left out, Trevor Davison. He didn't go on the tour either. Admittedly, Will Stewart did do a very good job at scrum time, but I think we were surprised by that rather than expecting that. And then England struggled in New Zealand at scrum time, and their best scrummaging tight head is in the UK. So, I don't know if we are completely there with how important this is. I'm not sure South Africa would leave their best scrummaging tight head in among their South African provinces and franchises back in South Africa for a tour, even if he wasn't so strong around the park.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Moving on, Taylor asks, England fans and media taking the Wallabies game for granted? I'm going to say no, based on what we've said earlier and how concerned we are. But Charles, we might get a Joseph-Aukuso debut. Just give a bit of background to people about him. He's the big cross-code hope, isn't he, ahead of the Lions series?
Yeah, £1 million player from the NRL. Rugby Australia have put a lot of money into him, with the aim of creating more exposure around the Lions next year. But he played both codes growing up, but then professionally he's only ever played league. He was a big leaguey. He's yet to play a professional game of union, even still now. But he is in the full Australia squad for this autumn tour. He is not in the Australia A squad. Australia A will play England A next Sunday at the Stoop. Will we see him? Don't know. It's a big mystery at the minute, and no one's really quite sure. But the plan, the master plan, is for him to play against the Lions next year, and these are Australia's last 4 tests before facing the Lions next year. He will obviously have a Super Rugby season, but in terms of international exposure, this is it. So if we don't see him, it might be unfair to chuck him in at Twickenham on Saturday, but we will see him at some point, surely, you'd expect. If not, he's not going to have any international rugby before taking on the Lions.
Quite sort of rangy athlete, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I mean, they're looking for handling, they're looking for offloads, they're looking for ways to break open the game.
There's been a lot of comparisons with Israel Folau.
Yes, yeah. And we talked about Wallaby scrum earlier. Yeah, I think there's plenty for England to worry about, and we are absolutely not writing them off. Charlie.
Yeah.
Brad asks, you recently stated that par for England would be 3 out of 4 autumn test wins.
It can stay at 3 out of 4 if they lose more than one.
That just assumes
out of 4.
It seems like
par can stay.
Everyone seems to now assume that they won't beat South Africa because they've lost to New Zealand.
Yeah.
I think that's what that question relates to. So,
I think what he's asking, kind of what will it mean? It will mean 2 or 1 win would be hugely underwhelming and would be damaging for the regime, for the momentum that had been built up after sort of promising performances but ultimately defeats. So they just need to start winning.
But I think now today we are saying 2 is absolute bare minimum, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
We said that. I think we said that.
We did
Yeah,
say that
but
before,
I think now in this context there is a massive difference between 2 and 1. I think there always was. I think 1 is, or less than 1, is really, really concerning. I think 2 now, I think, would be underwhelming, but sort of fine. Having lost to New Zealand, 3 would be excellent.
3 would be good.
And he's doable.
Yeah, we can't rule it out. Charles David asks, Steward or Furbank at 15? We've had loads of questions about this. I thought we'd kind of moved on from this fullback debate, and that England
escort him, man.
And I thought we kind of moved on from this, but maybe not.
Well, if teams, as Charlie's just alluded to there, if teams are going to box kick more with this greater scrutiny of escort and supporting players for the catcher, then maybe Freddie Steward comes back into it a little bit more, because he is better aerially than George Furbank. That's not a slight on George. I think Freddie Steward's probably the best aerial fullback in the world at the minute. He has also this season for Leicester looked a little bit more sort of creative and a bit more adventurous and showing a little bit more vision. But the shirts, Furbanks, he got one of the central contracts, and you know that second test in Eden Park when Stewart came in, he didn't necessarily have his best game at 15 there, and I think England did miss Furbank at fullback in that second test against New Zealand in Auckland in the summer. They miss his abilities with the ball, and it's almost like a sort of second playmaker when you've got Slade at 13, and also his ability to sort of put Faye-Waboso and Freeman and Slight Home into space from counters is also very. But he's bulked up and he's chunky. He put a massive shot in on I can't remember who it was, but early in the first
Jordan
half.
When he shot the door outside.
Yeah, it was Will Jordan.
Faye-Waboso.
Yeah, it was a great hit.
Yeah.
And I don't think George Furbank from the debutant in 2020 is putting that in.
No, that's true. Last 2. Elliot asked Charlie. Well, he just praises the move to have referees mic'd up over the stadium tonight. So at Murrayfield, this did work, but I couldn't quite hear Craig Evans from where I was. But it sounded like at Twickenham it was a roaring success.
Oh my God, it was one of the kind of top 3 aspects of the game for me. I was absolutely buzzing about it. No, it was great. It was great.
Just skipping home.
Yeah, how good was that? No, it's good. I absolutely loved it.
We can be a little bit grumpy, and World Rugby, well, certainly I can, and World Rugby do get a lot of bad press. That was magnificent. It was fabulous. Like it wasn't helpful for us in the press box necessarily, because we could hear him anyway. We have the ref mic, but you just sat there and thought, as a fan, this is fabulous.
Can I talk about escorting again?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, Charlie.
Great.
Always.
Yeah, no, how mad that was a directive that got brought in and was just so universally bought in by both teams that there weren't any penalties for it, and it basically changed how the game looked.
Credit also to Angus Gardner there,
yeah.
I think we have to do, who at every single box kick was screaming access
yeah.
at every single kick, as we pointed out at the time. But yeah, it is just very quickly, just going back to the referees on blown up at the stadium on the tannoy. It's become also, we had a chat with some colleagues afterwards, it's become almost a different skill now for referees, because they're having to sort of almost perform in front of 82,000 people and pick up and adjust to the reactions of the crowd, and the crowd went completely silent. And then when Angus Gardner says, when that late New Zealand try was ruled out for a tackle off the ball, when he said, "Okay, it is foul play, it is a tackle off the ball," the whole stadium
loudest roar, genuinely,
loudest roar of the whole game. And then normally he would just carry on talking because the crowd can't hear and there's no reaction, but he has to wait for the crowd to die down to then explain what was going on, and there was a bit of a pantomime feel to it. It was brilliant.
Just on that,
sound really simple-minded here by going, yeah, great referees, pantomime, but it was great, and there was a real sort of drama to it.
We're not worried about the crowd kind of influencing those decisions in any way, are we?
I think people underestimate how much refs think about the scenarios and think about how they almost the danger would almost be second guessing themselves and getting stuck into the home side, I think.
Yeah, I don't think so, because he'd already made his decision when he was presenting to the crowd. Admittedly, he would have got booed to hell had he not ruled out that New Zealand that New Zealand try for a tackle off the ball. But he would have got booed anyway if he'd have allowed that try to happen. It's just that he's there as more of a. He's the face of it now, and literally the voice of it.
And very finally, our last question. Thank you for all these. Angus asks, could Darcy Graham be a British and Irish Lion, a Test British and Irish Lion? Charles.
Yes. Next.
Well, I'm trying to think of who's going to be in the mix. You're
Right wings, Matt Hansen, Faye Boso, the two.
Yeah, and then
two others, and I'm missing one out.
Yeah, and then you've got.
But then you've also got Doohan
and
got
James
Lowe.
Doohan, James Lowe.
Might get a revival out of Josh Adams,
maybe. Freeman and Slightholme.
Wing is tight. Look, he's going to be in the mix. Could he sneak in as the?
I mean,
fourth winger?
He's
Maybe.
easily good enough to play a test match for the Lions, but then there's loads of other people, as we've just named, that are. And Lions tours are freaky things. There's always somebody who comes out of nowhere who you wouldn't necessarily predict to start or even to tour. Why couldn't it be him? He's a fabulous player. Why not?
And not to put a down on it, but people get injured as well.
Well,
and
that.
And that opens doors for players to come in who you might not expect. Thank you for all those questions. And that's it for today. Well done, Charlie. Well done, Charles.
Well done, Colsey.
Excellent work as ever. You will both be at Twickenham on Saturday. Be very good. I'll be at Murrayfield on Sunday. So next week I won't be here in the studio. I'll just be a floating head on the TV screen. But we'll dissect a very busy weekend of action. Can't wait for the games. Wales-Fiji as well. I think it's going to be really good on Sunday lunchtime with Fiji getting all those players back. So don't sleep on that one either. Loads of stuff on the website, as you can imagine, coming up with reaction from the weekend and previews for the games ahead. But thank you for listening and for watching on YouTube as well. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. At Go.compare, we are pleased to be partnering with the Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign, recognising the individuals who are going the extra mile at grassroots rugby clubs across Great Britain. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to nominate a grassroots hero who could win £5,000 for their club, as well as hints and tips from our insurance experts at Go.compare.